Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. President Donald Trump marking 100 days in office today. His second term leading to a dramatic reshaping of the federal government, foreign policy, and a crackdown on immigration. Today, President Trump heads to Warren, Michigan, where he is staging a rally, his biggest since taking office, and in a state he flipped from blue to red in the 2024 election. Now, during his campaign, he attacked his predecessor, Joe Biden, on his handling of the economy. Trump promised to boost growth and lower inflation, and do it in record time. And his focus so far has been on tariffs, with an on-again, off-again approach that's led to uncertainty in the markets and uncertainty on Main Street as well. Now, today the president is expected to give U.S. auto manufacturers a break by announcing an easing of tariffs on imported car parts and vehicles. So let's turn now to CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand at the White House for us. Natalie, thanks for being with us. How does he think the easing of tariffs will bring more jobs to the industry?
Good to be with you, Liz. Well, we know that this change in the policy really stems from the big automakers talking to the administration and saying, hey, look, we need more time and leeway to try to build more manufacturing or bring more manufacturing and jobs back to the United States. So, basically this is a good faith negotiation between them and the White House to try to make both sides happy here. And from what we've learned from the administration and senior administration officials detailing more about how this will work, basically the auto industry will still pay a 25% tariff on foreign autos and car parts. But they will not be subject to other tariffs. So when you think about the steel and aluminum tariffs that were separately put in place, or the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, or fentanyl related tariffs, they will not have what's kind of this stacked tariff effect. And this is going to help ease the impact of those auto tariffs. And we also learned that when it comes to auto parts, which are set to take effect in a few days now, there will be an offset process, a formula by which basically the car companies can apply for a credit or offset to help ease with that. So this is all aimed at trying to really try to blunt the impact to the auto companies. The big three automakers here in the United States, they are celebrating this move and saying that it will help mitigate the impacts and also help them make more investments in U.S. manufacturing.
Natalie Brand live for us at the White House. Thanks so much, Natalie. Now, we've been keeping our eye on the markets on this 100th day of President Trump's second term. The Dow and the S&P are up today. The White House also keeping an eye on the economy on this milestone day for the president. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent making an appearance at today's White House briefing. And he had this to say about the uncertainty that's surrounding Trump's tariff policy. Take a listen.
I think one thing that has been a little disconcerting for the markets is, President Trump creates what I would call strategic uncertainty in the negotiations. So he is more concerned about getting the best possible trade deals for the American people. We had 4 years of bad deals for decades of unfair trading, and we are going to unwind those and make them fair. What we are doing is we've created a process. I think the aperture of uncertainty will be narrowing, and as we start moving forward announcing deals, then there will be certainty. But certainty is not necessarily a good thing in negotiating.
All right, I want to bring in CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady from New York. Kelly, I want to hear your reaction to what the Treasury Secretary just said about this strategic uncertainty.
Well, look, in any good negotiation, it's not amazing for your opponent to know exactly what your reservation price, what you're willing to accept. So I hear him on that perspective. But we are talking about the economy, the stock market, businesses, consumers that are trying to figure out what to do, where to play, what country to source from. Investors are trying to figure out what sectors are going to be growth, heavy going forward. And you can really see that uncertainty reflected in how the markets have reacted since the president took office. Remember, there was that big surge post-election. businesses, investors, people were excited about the possibility of a very pro-business administration. But since the president took office, you can see the Dow, the S&P 500, as of today, before the market opened, were both down over 7% since inauguration. The NASDAQ down over 11%. And if you look at U.S. assets like Treasury bonds, the dollar index, that has also taken a hit. It all comes back to uncertainty. There's a lack of clarity around where the U.S. economy is going and where inflation is going, and that has the markets jittery.
Yeah, the markets are jittery. People are also jittery, and two economic numbers were released today. Kelly, what do they show about consumer confidence and economic confidence?
So I want to start with the labor market picture. We got a little bit of a tease of what we might see this Friday with the jobs report. So we got the JOLTS report, and this really showed you the job openings in the market. We expected 7.5 million. We came in much lighter than that at 7.2 million. Now, I want to emphasize this is actually March. So that was already showing that businesses aren't hiring as much. They're not looking for as many people to bring in the door, likely because of all of that uncertainty. And that's before any of April happened and any of the White House's reciprocal tariffs that were ultimately paused for all these trade deals to happen. The other thing that we got, to your point, was consumer confidence. And we are at the lowest level on that metric since May of 2020. And then when you strip out just the expectations index, that's how consumers are thinking about where the economy and their financial situation will go over the next 12 months, lowest level since October 2011. Consumers are not feeling good. And we're talking about the 100 days, Liz. There's another element that came out on Friday, consumer sentiment. Basically measures the same thing as consumer confidence. It's just run by different organizations. 32% drop in that expectation for the economy since the president took office in January. That is the steepest 3-month decline that we have seen since the 1990 recession. I threw a lot of numbers at you, but generally what it means is consumers are not feeling good about all this uncertainty.
All right, 32% drop. That is remarkable. All right, CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Thanks so much, Kelly. Well, another component of the president's first 100 days is his influence over the Department of Justice, starting with his first executive order pardoning Capitol rioters. And that one prompted some top justice officials to resign. And then came the lawsuits. In total, more than 300 cases against the president and his executive actions. Most of those cases, though, have to do with immigration. So let's bring in CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen. Jake, can you go over what stands out to you when we look at this list of lawsuits against the Trump administration?
Well, sure. I think the big thing to really take away here is, as you just pointed out, a number of these lawsuits are all around immigration. Now, this was kind of similar to what happened the first time around with President Trump's administration attempting to end things like birthright citizenship or remove protections on groups of people, whether that's Venezuelans, Cubans, from any other part of the country or a part of the world. But what I think you have to kind of take back is some of the stuff I think we've taken for granted, which is the student visas. A number of these cases, about 40 of them, are from students who are here, foreign students in the United States, who at least up until last Friday, when the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security changed their tune on this, were fearing removal and had to sue to potentially block that removal because there was a move by the Trump administration to take away access and deleting people's student visa records. There's a big fight in the courts playing out right now between what really is due process in terms of immigration. The Trump administration says that they have the right to remove and deport anyone who they see essentially who should not be in the country in their view legally. A lot of people have sued to change that and to keep themselves or others or loved ones in the United States. Think about Mahmoud Khalil, the Tufts University student, Rumeysa Ozturk, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man who was accidentally, according to the Trump administration, deported to El Salvador, and that ongoing legal fight, right? So a lot of this stuff, yes, it has come down, in the past, and President Trump's views going into this administration were very clear of what he wanted to do. However, really just a hot spot of executive power being used by the Trump administration, and courts really have been, so far, really the last line of defense for a lot of people hoping to remain in the United States.
And Jake, we're hearing a rumble of sorts at the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. against Trump's nominee to lead their office. What do you know about this?
Well, that's right. Edward Martin, who was an attorney for some of the January 6th rioters and had long been sympathetic to the president, was picked as acting head of this unit. Now, the U.S. Attorney's Office here in D.C. is not like the ones around the rest of the country. This one handles major cases, whether it's terrorism cases, major violence across the country, big business cases, and any kind of antitrust suits that are ongoing, of which there are two right now. The Trump administration is taking on both Google and Meta simultaneously in the courts just up the road from here. He is in charge of that, and a number of people, 100 plus former federal prosecutors or Department of Justice employees, came out and are hoping to block his nomination. They say that he is has no former experience in a role like this, and B, because of his views on the 2020 election, in which he has not admitted so far that it was fair and proper and that President Biden won. In addition to that, he's really had a long history of inflammatory remarks, especially since getting this acting role, having no problem assimilating with people like Elon Musk and threatening to go after anybody, specifically members of Congress, who have called Musk's role and authority into question and have maybe suggested, some rather heated rhetoric. He's certainly a top defender of President Trump's agenda, both in the courts but also in the public sphere. Even though there's technically no confirmation hearing that needs to happen for this group of people, along with congressional Democrats, are hoping to find a way to stop this nomination.
And Jake, one more thing. The Justice Department has a civil rights division, official division for that. And there's major potential changes afoot in that division. One headline said exodus. What can you tell us about this?
That's right. And actually, the Trump-appointed head of this division at the Department of Justice touted this over the weekend in a podcast interview, saying that hundreds of civil rights attorneys in the Department of Justice have left because they do not want to work under her new mandate. This woman's name is Harmeet Dillon. She is a longtime political advocate for Donald Trump, and she has put in new guidelines that reorient a group of lawyers that are usually focused on racial discrimination, policing, employment discrimination, things like that, into going after states for potentially allowing transgender athletes to compete in the other gender sport. We've seen the Trump administration already take a big line on that, to go after a number of other things like anti-Christian bias, which we saw Attorney General Pam Bondi and a number of cabinet members attend a meeting for last week. It's a marked shift, and certainly in the context of what we're talking about, this is a real overhaul of what for the last 50 or so years of the Department of Justice work has been under both Republican and Democrat administrations. This is certainly unique to just the Trump administration.
All right, Jake Rosen, thanks so much. For our CBS News this morning, anchor Tony DeCopel was at the U.S.-Mexico border and spoke exclusively with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. And they talked about several issues, including the recent theft of her purse, which had her driver's license and passport. But they mostly discussed the drastic change in immigration since Donald Trump returned to the Oval Office. Take a listen.
If you talk to all of these agents that have been down here for years, they say it's night and day difference from where we were a year ago, that they were overwhelmed and with illegals and people that were turning themselves in because they knew that they would be released into the United States undocumented with no consequences.
Now you can watch more of Tony's interview, including Noem's response to the controversial deportation cases of 3 small children who were born here in the U.S. That's tomorrow on CBS Mornings. And stay with CBS News 24/7 for continuing coverage all day long of the president marking 100 days in the White House. Coming up in the next half hour, we'll take a closer look at the Trump administration's foreign policy promises. Well, coming up, no tax on tips. It was a promise President Trump made during his campaign, and now the Treasury Secretary is saying that tariffs may actually make that a reality. We're on the ground in Vegas, where there is a bipartisan bill to allow workers to keep every dollar of their tips. You're watching CBS News 24/7. During the first week of President Trump's second term, he pitched a campaign promise. No tax on tips. This is what he said at a rally in Vegas on January 25th. Take a listen.
But we're going to get it for you. No tax on tips. No tax on tips.
Okay, so during today's press conference with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent suggested that tariffs could actually be the answer to offsetting the impact of nixing taxes on tips. Here's what he had to say.
The president campaigned on no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, and the restoring interest deductibility for autos, for American-made autos. So tariff income could be used for tax relief on all of those immediately.
Okay, so let's take a live look now at the Las Vegas skyline, where there is a renewed push on the state level to eliminate taxes on tips with bipartisan legislation. Let's bring in CBS News reporter Andres Gutierrez, who is live there now. Andres, you've been speaking with workers and union leaders about this proposal. What are you hearing?
Well, a lot of folks, Liz, are living paycheck to paycheck. So if any action were to come out of this, it would be a huge relief for them. I talked to one busser who works at one of the properties here on the Strip, and he says that because of those tips, on some nights he walks away with a couple $100. Other nights barely makes $100 in tips. So if this no tax on tips proposal were to get passed, it would bring some relief, a little bit of breathing room for his family, who, again, living paycheck to paycheck. We ended up getting a statement from the White House. Additionally, from what you heard there at the press briefing this morning, Caroline Leavitt sending this to me, saying that the president is working closely with Congress to get this done, and hopefully Democrats will use some common sense for once and support these popular policies. Obviously, the president did tout this on the campaign trail, and he hasn't signed any executive action or orders to get this done because he wants this to be a permanent solution. I also spoke with the head of the culinary union here, and here's what he told me about this issue.
Look, what we wish is we see anything coming from the president on the cost of living. We see nothing on that so far, except a disruption of the economy. I mean, we've got the fact that, international travel is down up to 15%. That's going to affect our folks. We'll be facing layoffs if this disaster keeps going forward. So what we want is action on the economy and protect the economy and move forward with the cost of living for working class voters. And look, the taxes on tips was a specific promise that he targeted Nevada and made big promises, and they haven't come through. So we think Horsford is the right person to drive this bill. And if we can get some bipartisan support and the president really pushing this issue like he promised, there's an opportunity.
So overall, the overall sentiment out here is to cut the politics and deliver.
Yeah, so many people who live in Las Vegas work in the service industry, Andres. And, we're talking about something at the state level. What would it take at a federal level to make those changes?
Yeah, so right now, as the president wants this to be a permanent solution, there are currently two bills in Congress that are working their way through. There is the No Tax on Tips Act that both Nevada senators have co-sponsored. It is a bill that was brought up initially by Senator Ted Cruz. That is just right now sitting in committee. And then there is another bill on the House side, Representative Stephen Horsford, who's from here in Nevada, in fact was a member of the culinary union himself. He has a proposal that would eliminate the federal minimum wage, because some of these tip workers, they end up making a base pay of $2.13 an hour, if you can imagine that. Wow. And so this proposal will get rid of that and also cap it at folks that make over $112,000. They want to be able to benefit of this, because they don't want anyone on Wall Street who makes bonuses to essentially consider that a tip and to get a tax write-off on that. So at this point, both of these bills sitting in committee, they are hoping that it could at least get some action done up in D.C. So it could bring some relief to the folks out here in Las Vegas and across the country who are, again, relying on these tips.
All right, we'll be watching. Andres Gutierrez live for us in Vegas. Thank you so much, Andres. All right, from Las Vegas down to Minnesota, where some folks are cleaning up the damage after severe storms rumbled across the state there. Yesterday's storms brought heavy rains, damaging winds, and hail as large as golf balls. At least one tornado touched down, damaging a farm in the area west of Kenyon. That's about an hour outside of Minneapolis. And it's not over yet.
No, I mean, yesterday was day one, but we're gearing up for more severe weather today, this time impacting 73 million Americans compared to the 50 million that we had yesterday.
Crazy.
Now, a couple of things with this. We're still going to see a chance for tornado activity into the afternoon hours today. Damaging winds, that's possible on top of large hail with these thunderstorms. But this becomes a lot more widespread today, reaching all the way over into New York. Compared to yesterday, it was a lot more fixated over into the Midwest. Let's take a quick look at what's happening for us as we head into the afternoon hours today, pulling up the map behind me just to kind of give you a picture of where these storms are at, where they're going, and how long this is going to last. We head into the afternoon hours today. Strong storms range from the northern portions of Texas all the way up across the Mississippi, just near Arkansas and Missouri, pushing over into the Ohio Valley. And now we're into our Wednesday forecast, and we're continuing to see the same pattern over and over again. But notice how a lot of that bulk of the system really lays over areas like Oklahoma and all the way over into Arkansas. With that, we can see the risk for flooding, especially flash flooding possible, all the way over into northern parts of Texas and Oklahoma into the afternoon hours today, tomorrow, lasting until Thursday morning, with anywhere up to around 3 to 6 inches of rain expected right around the corner. We could even see heavier pockets at times. Now, a couple things to mention with this. I've said we could see tornado activity, large hail, damaging winds, gust anywhere up to around 50, 60 miles per hour at times. But in that orange color that you see just over Texas, that's the enhanced risk right now issued for the severe weather outlook. That's just this afternoon. Now, we range all the way over into the Ohio Valley, up into northern parts of Pennsylvania and New York. They're seeing similar conditions today, too. So these thunderstorms are no joke. They're very heavy. We're going to continue to keep a close eye on them as we head into the afternoon hours today. For now, I'm going to send it back over to you.
Thank you so much. All right, we have an update on the tragic deaths of 4 children in Illinois. Police say a 44-year-old woman was behind the wheel when her car crashed into a building housing an after-school program. This happened in the town of Chatham, just south of the Illinois state capitol. Our Ian Lee spoke to a witness who heard the crash and then sprung into action to help.
My wife and I both heard several loud bangs. On this side of the building, there's a trash can and a pole, and we had seen a car had hit that location. So I called the police immediately, thinking that a driver had gotten into an accident. And then when I came around back, we had seen that she had blown through the building. As I kind of rounded the corner of the building, I had seen it as a very serious situation. There was a body that I saw immediately. Police started showing up. I turned to my wife and tried to get her to turn away. I didn't want her to see the situation. And
what were you seeing then?
A dead child on the ground.
Horrific accident there. Well, CBS News correspondent Ian Lee reports that car moved with such force it entered the east side of the building and then exited through the wall on the opposite side of the building.
Hi there. Let me give you a look at the scene behind me. We have this makeshift memorial that is forming. People throughout the morning have been bringing flowers. You can probably also see the plywood against the building. That is where the vehicle entered and then exited through the back. A little while ago, I was speaking with an eyewitness. He told me he heard a loud bang. He looked out back, saw a black Jeep Wrangler outside. He quickly called 911 and went to see what he could do to help. And that's when he saw a young child laying on the ground. We know that 4 people were killed, 2 7-year-olds, an 8-year-old, and an 18-year-old. 6 people were injured. 1 is in critical condition. The driver of the car, 44-year-old Marianne Akers, was taken to the hospital. She is not in custody. We are waiting on a toxicology report, but the police say that this doesn't seem to be an intentional attack. But right now, this is a community reeling from this tragic incident. This is a small town of around 15,000 people. Someone, if they didn't know someone directly, would know someone, possibly through the line, who knew someone who was injured in this attack. But right now, police want to know how something like this could happen. Back to you.
Ian, thank you so much. Well, it is day 2 of the state trial for 3 former Memphis police officers charged in the death of Tyree Nichols. Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith were already convicted of federal charges last year, but now they face second-degree murder charges in state court. Now, on the witness stand today, a fellow former Memphis police officer who took a plea deal. Tyree Nichols' mother was the first to testify in the trial yesterday. She described seeing her son for the first time in the hospital after that traffic stop beating 2 years ago. Her words, "My son was beaten to a pulp."
I walked into the room and I saw my son. I immediately went over to him and I fell out on him because my son was beaten to a pulp. They beat the out of my son and left him for dead. That's what they did.
Now, the state trial could take up to 2 weeks. The officers face up to 20 years in federal prison. All right, let's take you back to the White House now. In the first 100 days of President Trump's second term, DOGE has been making cuts at the NIH, or National Institutes of Health. The agency is the world's largest supporter of biomedical research, and since January, it has fired over 1,300 employees and canceled more than $2 billion in federal research grants. CBS News national reporter Karen Waugh is live in Houston for us, a city known for its medical centers and research hubs. Karen, how have hospitals been impacted by this so far?
Well, Liz, more broadly, the NIH funds all types of research across the country, things from vaccine development to finding the cure for cancer. These NIH cuts that have been made so far by DOGE, they say they're largely for what they call indirect costs, things like lab maintenance and support staff. But researchers I spoke to here in the Houston area, they say those indirect costs are really the groundwork, the foundation for what they do. They say in order to do experiments safely, they do need a clean and safe lab, and they do need adequate staffing. So researchers worry these funding cuts will not only impact the science that they're trying to do, but it could also mean layoffs down the line as well. In one example, we got a look inside Houston Methodist's Brain Tumor Bank. That's a bank run by Dr. Bob Rustamali. And what he basically does is take these brain tumors from surgery into his lab where his team studies them and tries to develop treatments and therapies for future cures, possibly, for brain cancer. They say if their NIH funding is cut, they have no other option other than to find that money somewhere else. They currently have 5 projects funded by the NIH, so they get about a couple $1 million from the government every single year. But they say in order to keep serving their patients as usual, they have to find that money somewhere else.
We have to be ready to pivot and do other things to make sure we're getting our research done or finding other alternatives to get it funded.
What are those alternatives?
Well, I reach out to, if there's philanthropists out there or people that have a concern in the things that various labs do.
Yeah, so for some context here, Houston Methodist's total annual budget is about $330 million. In total, they get $10 to $12 million in NIH funding. Now let's compare that to down the street, Baylor College of Medicine. They get a total of $326 million in NIH grants alone. That was last year. And that's how much they stand to lose this year. So it very much varies for different types of hospitals and medical centers. Now today, the Harris County attorney, along with other Houston area leaders, they're filing a lawsuit against the Trump administration, saying that these federal workforce cuts are not legal. They worry about these mass layoffs and these cuts to important, crucial things like medical research. They're really hoping their lawsuit or some of their action that they take could stop some of these cuts. Liz?
Karen Waugh, thank you so much, live for us in Houston. President Trump marking 100 days in office. Now, one of his promises was that he would end the wars between Ukraine and Russia, as well as Israel and Hamas. Charlie D'Agata joins us next to break down the status of both of those conflicts. You are watching CBS News 24/7. Well, today marks the 100th day of Donald Trump's second term as president, and we're taking a look at where things stand. One of President Trump's campaign promises to oversee an end to 2 ongoing wars, the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the Israel-Hamas war. But despite some temporary ceasefires, the 2 conflicts continue to this day. His administration held multiple meetings and phone calls with Ukrainian and Russian leaders, but has failed to convince both sides to agree to an extended ceasefire, let alone a peace deal. Now, on the Israel-Hamas war, a ceasefire held for several weeks, and during that time, there were hostage and prisoner exchanges. The ceasefire began the day before Trump's inauguration and was negotiated by Biden and Trump officials. That ceasefire, if you remember, held until March 18th when Israel launched missiles into Gaza with the U.S.'s backing. Now, for more on President Trump's foreign policies after 100 days in office, let's get to CBS News national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. Charlie, first question, is the president any closer to ending these wars?
Well, Liz, first of all, I think we have to remind everybody that the United States is already deeply involved in its own shooting war, a hot war against the Houthis. And the Navy just announced they lost an F-18 Super Hornet that rolled off the hangar deck of the USS Truman in the Red Sea. But we'll put that to one side. In terms of his vow to end these wars, let's start with Ukraine. OK, so there's some reason to believe there has been progress made, at least inching toward a ceasefire, if not something more permanent. That's after President Putin said that Russia would mark a unilateral ceasefire next month to mark Victory Day. We know this has been so important to this Trump administration, specifically this week, marking 100 days. And there was a comment from Secretary of State Marco Rubio that this is going to be a critical week. And after, President Trump had that brief meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the Vatican over the weekend, the mood music has been positive. So each side's going to have to make some concessions. Russia's demanding they keep the territory they seized from Ukraine going back to 2014, including Crimea. Zelensky says, and it's no surprise, he won't accept that, but there's a growing belief he's going to have to if they want this war to end. And Trump has said in the past he doesn't have to accept that deal.
Well, let's talk about
As
Crimea
for Gaza,
here. Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just lost track for a moment there because we talked about Gaza too, right?
Yep.
So for Gaza, there hasn't really been a lot of palpable progress, sadly, to report in the past few weeks. We know that these talks, for what they are going on in Cairo. One of the main sticking points there is that Hamas wants to remain armed. And Israel's objective from the get-go, and I was there when it was declared, wasn't the surrender of Hamas, but the total destruction of Hamas. Again, we have to remind people, 51,300 people have been killed, including 17,400 children, according to Hamas health officials. Israeli forces say that about 1,200 people were killed in those October 7th attacks against Israel.
And now, staying with Gaza here for a moment, Charlie, President Trump proposed taking over the Gaza Strip, pitching the idea to turn it into the Riviera of the Middle East. Is this even realistic? I mean, how is this being received?
Well, when this first came out about 2 months ago, I guess, something like that, 10 weeks ago, in some circles, it was just seen as deeply offensive and insensitive, especially, of course, the people of Gaza themselves and even some of America's regional enemies. Human agencies also question the legality of deporting a Palestinian population, even temporarily, which, of course, is a violation of a long list of international treaties, including the Geneva Convention. And, of course, Palestinians are no strangers to being forced out of their homeland. But now even Trump's administration officials have walked back the idea. What might be a more serious conversation, and they are having that conversation, is about America's involvement in helping to rebuild Gaza. It's going to cost a lot of money, figuring out how to house those Palestinians while they do that, rebuild those neighborhoods. There's going to be a lot of uncleared, unexploded ordnance to clear before they can return home. That's going to take billions of dollars in investment.
I want to go back to Ukraine here for a minute. They've been working to sign a minerals deal with Ukraine. Where does that stand? And how would the United States benefit from that?
Potentially, it would be a huge benefit. And a lot of people were laughing off the deal, saying, well, wait a minute, where does the United States get off trying to, suck up the natural resources in Ukraine? But there is some progress to report there. So Ukraine's government has agreed to at least an outline of a deal, what they're calling a memorandum of intent, which would be an economic partnership between the United States and Ukraine. So that kind of goes hand in hand with an investment fund for reconstruction in Ukraine. The Ukrainians don't want Americans running off with their rare earth minerals. They want to see that this is a sort of deal. Another important step. This is critical, too, and this happened in the past couple of days. The Prime Minister said there's now an agreement that the United States wouldn't seek to use those natural resources to repay the billions of dollars in aid that they've already provided throughout the war. So this would be going forward. The idea of reparations for the war that they didn't start was not sitting well with the Ukrainian people. In terms of how important it is, Ukraine is one of the most resource-rich countries in the world. May give you some indication why President Putin was interested in it. Deposits of lithium, graphite, manganese, titanium. These are all the things that we hear for modern industry. And it's a lot. A lot of the mineral deposits, and this is a big but, a lot of the mineral deposits are currently held by Russia, worth about $350 billion. And those resources are currently under Russian occupation. That is going to get sticky.
Another thing not sitting well with Ukrainians is the issue of Crimea. President Trump said that the Ukrainians may have to give Crimea up, but there's going to be some sort of peace deal here. But Charlie, if they give Crimea to the Russians, what does that signal to the rest of Europe and also China? I mean, this has major ramifications for world policy here if they let Russia take Crimea.
It really does, because the whole idea of what essentially is a land grab is and should be discouraged around the globe. You can't go in. It's not World War II. You can't just take over and occupy an area. Crimea is a little bit more tricky. It wasn't during this last round of fighting, but it was in 2014 that the Russians annexed it, and they really kind of did it without a fight. And making things more complicated, Crimea was once kind of Russian territory under the old USSR. So there is a sense that the Russians say, well, wait a minute, Crimea isn't even Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine is another thing, because a lot of people say Ukraine is part of Russia or larger Russia anyway. But Crimea itself, and if you look at where it is geographically, and I can also tell you, having been to Crimea, there are a lot of people inside Crimea that consider themselves Russian or at least, quote, Soviet. So that is a bit more difficult. But as you said, you know, China's going to be looking at this. They'll be looking at Taiwan and saying, well, wait a minute. If you're essentially rewarding Russia for what was at least ostensibly a military aggression, what's going to stop us from maybe claiming ownership over Taiwan, which the Chinese government would do? So, yes, this is a dangerous precedent going forward. I can tell you where it gets a little bit tricky is Zelensky doesn't necessarily have to accept that under his constitution. He might never accept it. That may not be a deal breaker, because what the Russians are looking for is an international acceptance of that annexation, primarily from the United States, hoping that the rest of the international community also takes stock in that as well. So, you know, I speak to a lot of people in in Ukraine, and little by little they're saying, look, they want the war to end. And if that's going to be the sacrificial lamb, that may be what they have to do.
All right. We'll be watching. Charlie D'Agata, thank you so much. All right. The new Canadian Prime Minister using his victory speech to send a message to the White House. And he's making it clear Canada's old relationship with the U.S. is over. You're watching CBS News 24/7. On the heels of President Trump's first 100 days in office, Liberal Canadian politician Mark Carney won Canada's national election, who ran largely on an anti-Donald Trump platform. Now, make no mistake, this was every bit an election influenced by the American president, who made repeated threats to annex Canada, make it the 51st state. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Chanel Call. Chanel, you watched this one very closely as a Canadian, and this was a huge comeback for Liberals in a huge way.
Yeah, it really was. It was up late watching the election coverage last night. This is a big win for the Liberals, the fourth Liberal mandate in Canada, which, by the way, is very rare in Canadian politics. The result here basically unfathomable just a few short months ago. The Conservative candidate in this race, Pierre Poilievre, he had a double-digit lead earlier this year. Then, of course, President Donald Trump launched that trade war and repeatedly suggested that Canada should be the 51st state. That changed the game. It changed the course of this very short 37-day election campaign. And last night in his victory speech, now Prime Minister Mark Carney mentioned Canada-U.S. relations several times. Listen.
And now, in the face of this crisis, united, we are buying Canadian. We are exploring everything this country has to offer. We are supporting our friends and neighbors in the crosshairs of President Trump through a crisis that we did not create. United, we will win this trade war and build the strongest economy in the G7, an economy that works for everyone.
But I should mention, Carney did not win with a very strong mandate. It's still unclear at this point whether the Liberals will lead with a minority or majority government. But what we do know, according to the numbers here, the popular vote was almost an even split. So that, of course, tells me there is a big divide in the country right now. It'll also mean, of course, this will be a big challenge for Mark Carney when he travels here to Washington, D.C., here in the U.S., to try to negotiate with President Donald Trump. Carney had said before the election was over that if he did win, a meeting with Trump would happen within days.
All right, CBS News correspondent Chanel Call, thank you so much. Well, it's heroic to rescue a bald eagle, but wait until you hear what lives inside this lake. How one Florida man risked it all to pull it off. You're watching CBS News 24/7. All right, check out this picture coming in from Oklahoma City today. Gray skies, but they are dealing with major storms today. Hail, tornadoes, winds, they got it all, Jess.
They really do. And it's not just Oklahoma. I mean, it's anywhere from Texas all the way up into northern parts of Pennsylvania and western parts of New York today and tomorrow. We're gearing up for severe storms widespread throughout these communities. Now, the major risk when it comes to flooding, that's going to be over Oklahoma and northern parts of Texas, with flash flooding possible today and tomorrow as these heavy storms continue to sweep throughout most of the state. Now, that pushes over into Arkansas as we head into our Wednesday evening forecast. It makes its way across the Mississippi. We'll continue to watch the severe weather become widespread throughout the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and all the way over into the Northeast too. But we really keep a close eye on Oklahoma all the way over into northern Texas, with anywhere up to around 3 to 6 inches of rain expected from now until our Thursday forecast. And these thunderstorms, they pose a threat when it comes to other things too. Of course, tornado activity is still possible. It was just yesterday, 25 reports from the National Weather Service came in for tornado warnings. And now you see that orange color highlighted just over northern Texas and some parts of Oklahoma. That's an enhanced risk for severe weather today, looking very similar to the Ohio Valley as we head into our coming afternoon hours too. Northern parts of Pennsylvania, western parts of New York, also gearing up for some severe weather around the corner. So we have strong winds. We have a chance for hail as we head into this afternoon. More tornado activity possible too. We'll keep you updated on that here in the Weather Center.
70 million people impacted by this. More than
73 million people today, gearing up for severe weather. Yeah.
Thank you, Jess.
Of course.
Well, buckle up. We got 2 Florida stories for you, both involving gators. Let's start in Lakewood Ranch, just outside of Sarasota. Safe to say that most people would try to avoid jumping into alligator-infested waters. But when this guy saw an injured bald eagle struggling in the middle of the lake, he didn't hesitate. He jumped in to help. 70-year-old Doug Hay jumped in, managed to get the eagle to shore, and he did it all while knowing very well that alligators live in that lake, including a 7-footer. This happened earlier this month, and since then, the eagle has been recovering at a wildlife center in Venice, Florida. It had an open hole in its chest cavity and will take a few weeks to heal up. But wow, that guy is brave. And this is the ultimate only in Florida story. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office posted this video of a barefoot man wrestling an alligator along a busy interstate. He looks like Crocodile Dundee there. The gator was spotted along the road on Sunday, and Fish and Wildlife joined forces with this guy to get it off the road. He was wearing all camo, no shoes though, but he did manage to put the gator into the back of a truck.
Never in my wildest dreams.
All right, you want to hang with that guy? Turns out this one he actually has some experience with barefoot gator wrangling. He's known as the blue collar brawler. He's a licensed gator trapper known for keeping his shoes off when he's on the job. They just get in the way. The sheriff's office posted that he managed to keep everyone safe. It was just a normal day in the Sunshine State.
Top, allumage P120, décollage.
Always need to see that. The European Space Agency launched the first ever satellite to access how the world's rainforests are protecting the planet from climate change. It blasted off today from French Guiana. Scientists say the satellite will discover how much carbon is stored inside dense rainforest canopies and kept out of the atmosphere. The project will also help scientists track deforestation rates. All right, much more ahead right here on CBS News 24/7. We're going to bring you the president's rally in Michigan this evening, celebrating his first 100 days in office. And stay with CBS News 24/7 for coverage, continuing coverage all day long of the president marking this milestone. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Lizzie Reiser takes over after this.